Well, hi everyone. I'm glad everyone could make it. And this is a very special, kind of first of its kind event. And comes from some conversations that I was having with Tim, which I'll explain a bit more in a second. But first, before I say anything, thank you so much, Tim, for sharing your time with us and being open to, open this up for, sort of a broader community discussion and engagement. I found Tim's book. Well, this was the result of finding some of Tim's videos online, which I got really interested in, really intrigued by. And Tim has been talking to some very familiar faces in the broader kind of community of folks in evolutionary spirituality. So he and I did a podcast, and then eventually that led me to find his Soul Story book, which is just it's an excellent, excellent read, and I wanted to kind of have an occasion to kind of amplify it and kind of shine some light on that and put it on people's radar because I feel like it's really just such a wonderful primer in a really concise, accessible way for some of the most important ideas arguably of our current moment. And so this led to just a number of ideas around trying to engage more, maybe try to get Tim out to Sky Meadow, etc. And so this is sort of a move in the direction of trying to engage more with each other and have some more conversations. And in this case, open it up to broader community engagement. This is the first kind of event I've ever done where sort of a live event and we'll have sort of a live Q&A and just kind of, again, open up the conversation. I'm used to more podcast conversations where they're recorded and it's just a dialogue or maybe a trialogue, but for the most part it doesn't really get more voices in. So this kind of experiment in that, and I'm looking forward to seeing what people have to bring into this, and maybe some questions that we can pose to Tim and whatnot. So anyway, that's kind of my little setup. Thanks again, Tim, and I'd love to jump into some conversation with you about this, and then after that, kind of open things up for other people's input. How does that sound?
Sounds good to me.
Lovely. So, all right, well, let's start. And again, we'll just talk for, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, and then people can join the conversation. But let's start with your work and what you've been up to. Again, this book, Soul Story, now is probably it's not old, but it's been out there for a few years.
Yep.
And maybe one place to start with it is just for people who haven't read it or are only minimally aware of it. Like, can you give a sense of the vision that you're working with, the sense of emergent spirituality, kind of this big new story that you're doing your own wonderful work to help kind of bring to the broader public awareness?
Yeah. So I am intrigued as to what the next big jump in our understanding of what this crazy thing is we're experiencing and what it means and why does it matter if it does. And I'm convinced there will be a new one because there always has been before. The question is, what will it be and when will it come? And my own hunch with it is that that new worldview will actually be a new form of spirituality because the last big transition was the scientific revolution. And part of that was to push away mythic religion and just go, okay, this is not up to the job and we can do far better. And we have. And that's enabled us to be here connecting on the internet, which is pretty damn amazing, really. And but it's also left us kind of adrift. Spirituality hasn't been able to keep up. And what I think is coming, and I'm sure everyone here may already be part of this, is a form of spirituality that could not have existed before the scientific revolution. So a post-scientific spirituality. And that's both about the level of inquiry and doubt and questioning, which has come since then, the level of our individual reflection. But also, I think there's some key ideas. And the one that is absolutely central, I think, is the idea that we live in a process, that we now know we're in an evolutionary process, which is an extraordinary idea. And everything seems so far to be pointing towards it being true. So we now know we're in this, 13.8 billion years have got us from hydrogen to you and me having a conversation about the universe, which is the thing that always blows my mind. And So the question for me then, as someone who has spent his life exploring experientially and teaching around spirituality, has written on, I don't know, 35 books on all of the different spiritual traditions. The question for me is, well, how does spirituality fit into that? And specifically the big questions that like the survival of the soul, which is absolutely central to most forms of spirituality. Is that something we now just abandon? That's like, oh, well, we used to believe all that nonsense, but that we've gone beyond that. My own experience has pointed in the opposite direction. I've been around death a lot. I work with the dying, and I was a very early in studying near-death experiences when I was very young. And so that's just one example, but it's like, where does that fit in? And so the idea, in essence, Brendan, I think that's motivated Soul Story was, can I make sense of a worldview which goes, what this is a process of emergence, it's a process of becoming or forming, and everything that has any form whatsoever is part of one natural process. Can I make sense of that? Because it's so beautiful and elegant. Nothing outside, nothing before, nothing, just the one process of realization, of forming, something formless in the process of forming. And can we make sense of that? Can we make sense of the scientific knowledge from that perspective, which I think we can? And then can we see spirituality as an emergent level, or can we see that what spirituality is concerned with as an emergent level of this one process? And I think we can. And that means that we can integrate spiritual experience on its own terms, but by seeing it in this new evolutionary way with our vast knowledge now in physics and biology. So that's, I think, was the motivation to do it, was to just start in that book to lay out a almost like a program, a vision of what about if we see it like this? And then for the last 8 years, I've been pushing it and pushing it and pushing it to see if it'll fall over. And it's just got stronger and stronger and stronger, so that now I'm ready to take it to the next level and share what the last 8 years have been of intensely going, right, let's really dig into this and bring this out. And because if we can, it brings spirituality back in a whole new way.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, there's so much that resonates with that. I mean, deeply, deeply resonates. And the again, the way that you're able to express these really, really big ideas so concisely and accessibly is wonderful. I feel like this is again like a primer, a wonderful introduction to this because it just it unfolds very beautifully and elegantly in your expression. And there's so many things that are resonant about that vision, which I find very attractive. I should have mentioned at the outset too, where this is sort of this event is kind of under the umbrella of Meadow Institute, and that's the institute that I run here in Vermont. And we are really dedicated to exploring just that sort of vision that you're explaining of like of seeing spirituality through the lens of complexity, of seeing meaning and purpose through the lens of kind of systems-based thinking, and trying to apply those lenses to that in a way that situates what we've always kind of meant by things like soul and spirit and meaning and purpose, but taking it out of that sort of two worlds mythology and putting it into that one processual, dynamic, evolving world that you're describing, and allowing us just a different set of yeah, a different way to relate to all that stuff. And those familiar with like integral theory, have a similar sense of that kind of move, which is like rather than say that spirit is like outside of the natural world and something like that, but it's more like it is the emergent kind of knife's edge of an evolutionary process and an emergent process that we're actually moving into the spiritual in a sense. Maybe we're at least in the past that looked very different, and it's been through the process of evolution and complexification that these ideas that are kind of core to spiritual and religious traditions historically come to make sense in a new light when we situate that as sort of a product of the complexification process rather than maybe somehow outside of it or undergirding it from the beginning and getting it going. Different ways of thinking about it. So it's a new way of approaching all this. And as far as its newness as well, I mean, I was going through this book again before this, and you're not just stating some of those big ideas, which again other folks have been getting at for some time as well. You're really also offering some really novel contributions to that. and maybe just briefly we'll touch on this before opening it up to some other people who want to bring in their ideas to the conversation. But one of the most striking aspects of this is your kind of notion of the amagnos, or the kind of the emergence of sort of the imaginal realm for human beings, and thinking about that after death experience potentially itself is undergoing a kind of evolutionary process. So maybe just as one point, which if you wanted to speak a little bit to that, I find that a fascinating prospect, and I'd never heard anything like that before I'd read your book. So I don't know if there's any thoughts you'd want to, weave that into your account at all, or anything else you wanted to say before we again kind of open this up a little bit.
I got too many thoughts around it, David. That's the
Yeah.
truth. It's just like, there's a lot. So for me, I'll try very hard as I go through to define what I mean by the terms I use, and then hopefully, people use words in different ways. For me, what I mean by the soul or the psyche is just the Greek word for soul, the ancient Greek word for soul. To me, it's like what I have been exploring is, I'm always experiencing two types of experience. I'm experiencing the sensual world, and I'm experiencing the imaginal. And it's always the case. And I think that's what's given rise throughout history to the idea that we are body and soul, because we're experiencing it every day. Now, the word soul has got completely theologized into something else. But for me, it's like, no, that's what it is. You're experiencing it right now. With your body, you're hearing the funny noises I'm making, and with your soul or your psyche, you're understanding the meaning. There's no meaning in the funny noises. All of that's on the level of the soul. And that has evolved. I think that's the most evolutionists would say, yeah, of course, it's evolved. So the question is it just evolved as some byproduct of biology? Is the story, which is what I see in the mainstream, which is, yes, it's all evolved up to biology, and then this is side effect of the psyche. And that's it. Rather than going, no, what the psyche, it seems to me, has evolved as a whole domain, as an ecosystem, just as much as a biological ecosystem. And we are in that ecosystem right now. And that's what I mean by the Imagnos, is that there's an imaginal realm. Now, spirituality has always been about that from shamanic times. If you study shamanic, especially if you do some shamanic practices, it's about the esoteric traditions are all about learning how to explore that realm. The spirit realm, the Duat for the Egyptians, the Bardos, it's ubiquitous. So what I'm exploring is what happens if we take that seriously, and my experience of my own spiritual experience is it's a good idea to take that seriously, but we see that as evolutionary, that the psyche has evolved, and just as biological systems evolve together in an ecology, so the psyche has evolved onto another level. And just as the ancient teaching would be, well, it's a whole different realm, it's not a different realm, it's a more emergent realm. And it's that which we can study if we want to understand a whole lot of spiritual, for want of a better word, phenomena, like the psyche. One of the things it does is it gives a very simple understanding of the question that I face when I think about my death, which to me is, when this biological part of my system fails, does the psyche part of my system just stop because it can't, or is this process, which I am, able to continue? And what intrigues me about the literature and also the near-death experiences and also being around death is that what it looks like is the imaginal not only carries on but becomes more and more vivid, which is the same thing we all experience when you go to sleep and you withdraw your attention from the biological and you dream, and you have an amazing dream, or you take psychedelics or ayahuasca or something, or you in any way, when you move your focus to the imaginal, it comes to life, because wherever you focus, you start processing that in high definition. So that's the beginnings of what I'm trying to explore, which is, okay, maybe this spirit realm, whatever you want to call it, that has itself is an emergent level of reality, and that we can see it's the leading edge. So that not only does this allow us to approach, it allows us to ask questions like, could the psyche function? Could it, and not regarded it as simply like, well, it's nonsense. so that we can have an intelligent conversation about it, because what I'm developing is an ontology which makes sense of that possibility. And to be able to open up to these things again, I think would have a tremendous impact just for individuals, but also collectively.
One last question yeah, before we again open things up is one question that comes to mind for that which we could spend so much time talking about is like where here's how I'll frame it, but it's admittedly this isn't even the right question, but where is that imaginal realm, right? Like if I look at like the biosphere, I can kind of look out there and I can point and say, oh yes, there's the rocks and the trees. And if we're maybe even talking about the news sphere, in sense of like, there's an informational overlay, that we can kind of track using our information processing systems and the internet and our language and all this stuff. Um, what you're also describing in this book is a beautiful image to me of, this like this realm, this space of that imaginal spiritual reality, where it dovetails so beautifully with other, images that I'm familiar with from, say, like the Empyrean from Dante and the
I know, no,
construction
we can see those bits if you want.
of God out of the imaginal. So, but the question is like, yeah, how do we think about that as a reality that obviously isn't immediately available to like point to? And you know what I'm saying? There's a
Yeah,
question there. I'm
yeah.
not really
Well,
out. So,
I mean, my approach very much, Brendan, is we'll have a look now. Where is it? Well, it's nowhere. It's an imaginal space. It creates space when you can dream up a whole world and inhabit it. You can, it is images of the sensory world, but it doesn't have any of the what I call passivity. It doesn't have any of the habits of the algorithms that run the material world. It's images of them, which allows it to have a certain freedom, which means you can get on a horse and fly, or you can do anything. And because it's images, but you're creating spaces through which you can walk around, and you create a space in which you can hear yourself speak to yourself, which is thinking. You can, I can say it out loud, and now I'm going to say it to myself. Well, where did I do that? Well, it's in a completely different space, which has arisen like as an image of the sensory experience, and then it's taken off. So to me, that's where all the evolution's happening. Biologically, we've changed, but not much. But what's happened in the realm of images and ideas in the imaginal has allowed us, as we said, to be now on the internet talking across the whole world. And that's because of this massive evolution that's happening. To the degree that anyone here is intrigued by anything I say or you say or anyone else says, we will be evolving now. We're actually evolving now. It's happening. This is it. And that's how fast it is on this level. We're really moving now. So I think it's what I want to be able to claim, really, and first to put it out in Soulsphere is, look, this area of spirituality, far from being something to dismiss as outdated mumbo jumbo, although don't get me wrong, a lot of it is, a lot of it, or a lot of the understanding is simply old. That's all. And what it needs is to go, what's the essence of it? And can we find that again? Because I think it's the leading edge. I think it's the absolute leading edge, the spiritual exploration, awakening, that these are where we're going. And if we haven't got the philosophy to support that, we won't be able to make it there. And at the moment, we haven't. And I know there's lots of interesting people trying, and I want to contribute to that, to try and the image. I'll just say this. I mean, this is very. I like to try and get it down as simple as I can, because is to say, look, if you went back to the 9th century or something, and there was a big roll of thunder, and someone went, "Oh yeah, that's Thor. That's a big man in the sky with an anvil hitting something." It would be nearly impossible to say, well, maybe, or maybe it's a kind of a side effect of electromagnetism, because that wouldn't make any fucking sense at all. They have no idea what that means. But listening to the thunder is the same. That's real. And I feel like with spiritual experience, it's like, look, these things are significant spiritual experiences, which themselves are evolving. Everything's evolving. So they've changed too, as we've changed. But our understanding needs to jump forward as to what they are and why they matter so much. Because I think anyone, and I suspect many people here have had them, if you have these profound experiences, subjectively, this is really significant. It really is. For me, it's like there's nothing comes close. So how can we understand them now in a way that does them justice? I think that's the motivation.
Yeah. Well, of course, you and I could keep talking, and I would love that. But I want this to be an occasion for other people to yeah, bring their ideas and voices in the mix. So let's open it up at this point. I'll continue to have questions and things I can throw at you if people don't want to jump to the microphone, so to speak, right away. So, but if anyone does have anything that they want to ask or bring into the conversation, and we can open this up, just I guess use your react button and raise your hand if you're able to do that, and then I can just kind of call on you. And then yeah, I'd love to get other people's thoughts on all of this. And hopefully, at least this has been so yeah, just go ahead and do that anytime that you'd like. But hopefully this is great. We've got some. So
we're off.
Wonderful. We're off. All right. Well, then I'll stop pontificating then, and let's go to Lawrence. Go. You had your hand up first.
Hi, Lawrence.
I'm here. So I understand what you're saying, Tim, and I kind of agree with it. But what about, in other words, if consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the brain or is in the brain, can consciousness exist outside the brain, but in another physical matrix? In other words, in an energy field. In other words, or like Mr. Seldrake says, the morphogenic field. And I see, like, if we have a energy field, and then consciousness goes from your brain into that field, and I call it the cosmic memory field, whatever. And then it remains active. In other words, it could do things in that field. So in other words, it can exist individually with other consciousness collectively. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that?
Well, I resonate with the place you're going very much, and Rupert, when I was younger, especially, was a big influence on me, and I had the chance to talk to him a few times about it. He's a lovely man. Let me say the same thing back to you in a different words, just because that's the way that I have come to see it. First of all, the word consciousness. The word is used in widely different ways. I think you're using it as a word. I'm not trying to presume, Lawrence, but like the way that I use the word psyche. This thing which has arisen. Now, the question you're raising is, of course, the big question, which is it a byproduct of the brain, or can it exist without the brain? What I'm trying to explore, and I'm going to try and say this really fast, there's quite a lot to say, so I'm going to try and cover it, which is that I think paying attention is what consciousness is. We're conscious of what we pay attention to. When we've evolved to pay attention to our own processing, it's given rise to this world of images. So the psyche has arisen from the biological sphere. I would definitely say that. However, the ontology that I want to explore is quite close, I think, to what you're saying, which is, let me use a metaphor just because, or an analogy actually. It's the quickest way to try and get it across. It feels that we can understand the universe a bit like a learning AI system. Now, it's not an AI system, it's not a computer, it's reality. But it's the latest technology, and gives us a fabulous analogy. Because what we now know is, first of all, physics has shown that the language we need to understand the very, very primal levels of reality are information. It's not matter, it's information. And what is information? It's differentiation into this or that. That's what the bit is, the simplest piece of information. So the way I have come to see things is, the universe is a fundamental oneness, which is formless. It has no form, which is being differentiated into everything. And that one process, which is from the very simplest thing you can possibly imagine, is becoming ever more complex. And we now know from AI that you can, Google just did this, didn't they, last year? If you saw it, it was fascinating. If you take digital information, random information, and wait long enough, it starts forming patterns and they start interacting with each other. There you go. That's what looks like the universe is. And those patterns, I think, are what Sheldrake's trying to get at with his morphic resonance. I call it passivity, because what it seems to me is that everything that has formed starts governing what can happen next, so that the patterns that have arisen will continually repeat, but never in quite the same way. So that you're in a process which is governed by repetition, what I call passivity, and creativity. So it's work. You look at this moment. This moment's pretty much the same as the one before, but not quite. Oh, and this one, and this one, and it's like, and that's continually happening. Now, that's very much like an AI system. It's generative. It takes the patterns of the past and slightly does something new with them. And I think that's what's got us to here, this evolution of information. Now, to me, the way that I've ended up looking at it, which has been definitely influenced by Rupert, would be to say, it's like the past hasn't gone anywhere. It's actually information which is accumulating. The past hasn't passed, it's accumulated. There's more of it now than there was. There's more of it now than there was. There's more of it now than there was. And that past is creating the, let's call them algorithms or habits, or Rupert would call them, which is governing how everything is functioning. So you've done a lot of things already there. One of the things you've done is you've gone, look, even the laws of nature are evolutionary. Everything's evolutionary. They've also come into form. And then you've gone the past. Physics for a long time has talked about time as a dimension. That the past exists. We are a process. We are, and this is arising from the past. Now, in an AI system, it's arising. All that information is on a hard disk. And the analogy I would throw out very quickly here is going, look, I think the past is like the hard disk of the universe. It's not a hard disk, but it's like one. So in the same way that I'm looking at this screen right now, and if someone came up and went, all that exists is what's on the screen, Tim, I would say, no, don't be daft. There's a hard disk behind this running everything. It's huge. And what I see on the screen is just what arises from it. And I think what we experience as the forming, the moment, is like that. It's the equivalent of the screen of the universe. And the hard disk is all of the past, which is governing what everything does. Now, if you get that, then you can look at your identity in a different way, because you can go, oh, I'm not just this. I am all of my past. I am all of the algorithms that make Tim speak with an English accent, not an American accent, which keeps my biology working, which I can say these things because I've read these books or had these thoughts. So I am, and so are you. So what's happening now is you're meeting everything that's ever been Tim, and I'm meeting everything that's ever been Nish or Rebecca or Brendan or Justin. It's like, that's what we are. So then you can look at the biological level and go, so it's more complicated than, or more interesting than I'm a biological thing. I am, but actually I'm the system which is running this, which is why cells come and go all the time, trillions of them. And why, you've heard the estimates, I'm sure, that every single atom in my body is different from 10 years ago. Because all of that's passing through, because I'm not that. I mean, I am that in one way, obviously, but I'm the system organizing this, moving things around, keeping it going. And then you go, okay, and then there's another level to the system. What does that do? Well, it organizes imaginal information. So you've now got a program, as it were, on the hard disk, which is organizing this level and this level. Now, what happens if this level of the psyche has evolved so much now that it can just keep functioning? And the analogy, and look, these are very quick analogies. Please forgive me, but I'm trying to get across some ideas very quickly here. If here we are connecting on Zoom, and you can see me, and you can hear me, but if right now, suddenly we lose the sound and you're not going to think, that's impossible. That's impossible. How can I see him but not hear him? Because they're the same thing. They're all part of the same thing. You're not going to go, well, look, we evolved the ability to convey sound decades before we had the ability to convey visuals. How can I see him but not hear him? You're not going to do that because you know that there's a Zoom program on my computer running this. And it's perfectly possible that the sound bit can fail and the video bit can still work. And you'll go, oh, that bit's not working. So with this quick analogy, what I'm saying is when you get that you are a passivity system, you're a system which is organizing information on the biological level and on the level of the imaginal, what I'm suggesting is it's perfectly possible that the system can fail on the level of the biological, but carry on the level of the imaginal. And that what's surviving death isn't some special little thingy called a soul or a spirit or consciousness, anything. What's surviving is you. The process that you are continues. It's just that that bit of the process doesn't work anymore. So you can't access the biological senses. You can't access the biological level. That's you can't, that's gone. But what's surviving is you, which is why it seems to me one of the interesting things about the near-death experience is that one of the most common things that happens is the life review, where people see the whole of their life. Because I'm suggesting that's what they are. They didn't have a life. They are a life. You are a life. That's what you are. And that what's happening then is that person, that process continues, but just part of it's dropped away. You can't do that anymore. That's gone. But you've got this. And that the part that you still continue with, it looks to me like becomes super, super vivid. And you're able to enter the imaginal with much greater depth because you're no longer carrying all of the passivity of the biological level. Oh, how did I do? That was a bit ambitious, but I had to go, Lawrence.
Excellent. But let me just follow up. And so you're saying the psyche can exist on its own, not in another physical matrix.
Yes, although I don't, yes, I do. And I'm saying, but I'm not saying it's something separate. I'm saying, look, there is a psychobiological system, which is Lawrence right now, and it's all integrated and working together, but it's working together on two very different levels of emergent reality. There's the biological material level, and then there's the imaginal level. And just as we saw earlier with Brendan, the imaginal level is quite different. There's no space, there's no matter, it's imaginal. And so what I'm saying is the part of the Lawrence program, I don't want to devalue you, you're a human being, but just for this analogy, the part of the Lawrence program that when it eventually, which I suspect it will, can't function anymore on the biological level, it can just carry on. It's just carrying on. It's just it can't do that anymore.
Thank you.
So much there, but thank you. Great question. And how about we go to Rebecca next?
Hi. Thank you, Brendan and Tim, for doing this. Tim, I didn't even know who you were until Brendan posted the event. So this last week, I got your book and I read the whole thing. In fact, I read 3 of your books, and they resonate very much with me. My question, I think, is kind of a technical question. So in the realm of reincarnation, in this present incarnation, my name is Rebecca and I'm 55 years old. Let's say in my past life, I was a guy named Bob, and he passed away 60 years ago. And 10 years later, his wife died, and he was there to greet her. But at that time, Rebecca is now 5 years old. Does the soul, do you feel, live their lifetimes, at least in the past, because the past is always there, live those past lives simultaneously?
No, no, I don't think that. I think I think what the thing you're pointing to with reincarnation is an interesting question to which I have no answer. I don't know, but people do seem to meet their loved ones, and I mean, basically, all I'm suggesting with that, I always want to root it in what we're experiencing now. It's like I'm already connected with my daughter and my wife. I can feel them now. And if I practice, I can really tune into them. I'm connected with my mother. She's died, but I'm with her a lot because I can tune into her. And so I think we're connected. We're in this web of connections. And so the fact that that becomes something that happens to us when we die, that seems quite plausible to me. How long somebody waits before they reincarnate, I don't know. Maybe it varies. Who knows? But the question you're answering about the time, it feels to me like, no, this is a process where one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. And that seems to be, that this process of becoming is what existence is. So it's not that, what I'm suggesting is that it can't happen at the same time because it's one thing after another. And we can't go back in time because we're not going forward. It's the wrong analogy. We don't go back and forward. Time is not like going into town and coming home. Time is like something which is accumulating. It's forming and forming and forming and forming. And what forms is based on what was formed already, but in new relationships. So that would be where I've ended up with that at the moment, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Cool. Let's go to Aaron.
Hey, I am really excited to meet y'all. I've been really looking forward to this. I'm someone who's been working on ideas about emergent spirituality ever since I read Gödel Escher Bach and dropped acid back in college. And I was actually about 300 pages into building a Wikipedia site about emergent spirituality when I came across Bobby Azarian's book and his Substack. And then when I joined his Substack, it recommended me Brendan's Substack. And then I was like, holy cow, these meta-modern guys are doing almost exactly the same thing I'm trying to do. But I noticed, you guys tend to approach it, I think, from more of an academic, philosophical, and more of a new age spiritual tact. I come from a very secular humanist background. I was very involved in the Sunday Assembly movement, which is the atheist church for many years, and that's kind of where I come from. And I know that the people in that neighborhood absolutely need more meaning in their spirituality. That's the main problem that I saw with Sunday Assembly, is that it didn't have that element to it. It didn't have the spiritual element. They were going through the motions, but they didn't have the vibe, but if you were to have this conversation about like reincarnation and the afterlife and things like that in front of that group, they're going to roll their eyes so hard. And my question is, how can we present emergent spirituality in a way that can really be broadly understood and accepted? Can we create a populist emergent spirituality that can really go beyond kind of the niche philosophical movement that it currently is?
Great question, Aaron. So I've been around the block with this for so many years, I can't tell you. The place I've ended up right now is obviously say what's appropriate to the people you're talking to. But also I think we need to be bold. I think, with the issue of does the soul survive death, does psyche survive death, it's going, well, either it does or it doesn't. We need to find out. which this we should be focusing on this. We need to, it's a pretty important thing. Does that happen or not? Is there a level of reality in which we're connected in the way that I'm suggesting or not? And that we should have the same level of inquiry that we would have with any other level. And I have immense sympathy or empathy, what's the right word, resonance with atheists, because most of the atheists I know are very smart, rational people. And they've taken this idea of, I'm going to go for God. Can I do that, Brendan? Can I have a quick, let's have a go at God.
Go for it.
Because this will address what you're saying. So, to me, I experienced something I thought of as God very early on in my life, blew my mind. And I've had a relationship with something greater than me all through my life. Now, you haven't had any of that. It will sound like nonsense. And that's part of the problem. If people who haven't had these experiences, it will sound like people are either making it up or they're mentally ill. And given the state of spirituality, which is just so full of charlatans and nonsense, I understand why they would think that. So one of the things we need to do is we need to be able to share these profound experiences. That's one of the things, so that people go, oh, right, that's what you're talking about. Yeah, what is that? Rather than, so that people actually have an interest. A lot of people who have that rolling of the eyes around death have not looked into it, have not gone into near-death experiences, or have not been around people dying very much. If you do, it changes everything, because it's like, wow, okay, what's this? We have hundreds of thousands of accounts of people going, yeah, I died, and they medically died, and some of them are neuroscientists. These are smart people, and they're going, and this happened. Well, we shouldn't just dismiss it. Oh, well, that's just nonsense. That's the place where I want to start. So engaging with it rationally. The problem with spirituality is it's pre-scientific, it's pre-rational. We need to be questioning, we need to be rational. Then what I'm suggesting as a possibility is how about we can look at it in this way, so that it doesn't have to be woo-woo. So I think the whole mythic God at the beginning who's creating the universe, I just think it doesn't work. And so I'm completely with the atheists. It's like, if there's a God at the beginning, he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, there's been 5 whole extinctions. This God's got no idea. It's taken him 13.8 billion years to get to us, having this conversation. We've gone through 250 million years of dinosaurs. This God's an idiot. And then look at the world. It's so full of needless suffering. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't want to, suffering can play a role, but some of it is just so, all those, the one that always gets me was reading an account of a little boy who'd gone swimming and a bug thing had gone into his ear and then ate his brain from the inside. It's like, no, fuck that. That is, any God that's responsible for that is one that I don't like him. So we've got this mean, stupid God at the beginning. It doesn't work. And what I think the atheist spirit has come in and gone, oh, for goodness sake. And I think they're right. It's like, yeah, enough of that, of course. But hang on, I keep having this experience. And it's not of something mean and stupid. It's of something sublime and so loving and just like more, and just so much that it blows it's just this enormous benevolence and love. And so what I'm playing with is, okay, well, what about if this starts with the simplest thing you can imagine, which is the formless in relationship as a bit of information. Can't get any simpler than that. But it's evolved into the psyche, which is this whole domain. And then from there, it has evolved into another level, another super system, which is what we experience as God. So that it's real. It's completely real. It's just not this madman at the beginning. It's the most emergent level of reality. And the model for me for that would be somehow a whole load of individual cells got it together to form multicellular organisms, eventually as complex as you and me. Astonishing. Well, what if the same thing is happening on the next level? And that when human beings come into these spiritual states of oneness, when they enter these emergent awakened states, they start to integrate. And what that integration is a communion of souls, like the body is a communion of cells. And the big mind isn't at the beginning. The big mind is made of all the little minds. And again, to use the computer analogy without wishing to sound completely crass, if you take a whole load of AI systems and you plug them all together, you get a super AI system. And that's an analogy for what I think is happening. So we're tuning into something which is itself evolved. So the universe, so the God is a difficult word. We don't even need to use that word. But that big mind, that super intelligence is not where it's come from. The universe is flowering into God, if you will, just like it flowered into you. Just like you started as a fertilized egg and then went through a whole load of biological stuff and then developed conscious and then developed a psyche and then off you've gone and here you are now, that the universe kind of is playing out the same basic pattern. It's starting with the simplest thing, just the one as two, something we can only study with maths. And it's developed into life, and then it's developed into psyche, and then it's developed into this sublime super system. And we can be part of that. And that when we enter these deep spiritual states, and I think they're accessible to anyone. I've been sharing them for decades now, all around the world, that you can slip into them much quicker than people think. And so that what I would say to groups like who are meeting is going, look, this is a way that you could approach this level and see, and first of all, experience it. And secondly, you don't have to retreat into a mythological mumbo jumbo. You can think about this rationally, and here's a way that you could see it. So that's my answer to how we can go forward at the moment, Aaron.
Awesome. Big question. And yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say, how do you what do you think about pantheism as a way to get atheists to see the universe more spiritually?
I don't. The problem with pantheism for me is it's still this idea that there's something at the beginning, which is, that God is arising as everything. Well, either there's nothing. There's two types of it really. There's panentheism and pantheism. So pantheism, really, the word God doesn't mean anything. If you just go with the universe is God, which is what, oh God, I can't remember his name. How embarrassing.
Spinoza.
Yes, thank you. There you go. You went straight there, which was what Spinoza's saying. I mean, it's a way of trying to rescue God, but it doesn't mean anything anymore. If you have panentheism, which is what Hegel's saying, you've still got God, but God is arising as the universe. And that's very much the route I took for a very long time, until it felt like, no, that's not working. We need to see the beginning as radically simple. It doesn't start with anything which is conscious or intelligence. So not intelligent design, but the universe is the evolution of intelligence. Not a creator, but the universe is the evolution of creativity. So when we say the one at the beginning, what I mean by that now is not the one which is conscious and has intentions and wants to know itself and is kind of really God. I mean something that's undivided, just one, has no other qualities. It's just undifferentiated. That undifferentiated being is differentiating as everything. And then that anything we might want to use such a grand word as God or that greater than us-ness that you can experience, that's where it's going. That's not where it's come from. That's where it's going.
Hey, thanks so much.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure.
Yeah. I want to go to Nish next, but I also, it's an invitation to chat with you, Aaron, and whoever else would like to explore this topic, because around how we present these ideas to different audiences based on where they're coming from, based on, are you coming from an atheistic background or a religious background, or what kind of religious, there's how we language these ideas and allow the conversation to evolve and develop, I think is a really important topic I think a lot about. And yeah, I think that there's a lot more that could be said about that and trying to do that effectively. Hopefully events like this and things that various groups of ours, it sounds like you're up to this as well, are doing that, or offering these things to different kinds of groups and are landing in different spaces. So we need like a diversity of those. But I think that's the sort of question we need to be asking. And yeah.
Can I add something else to that, Brendan?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is my personal thing, and I know that not everyone feels this. This is where I've ended up at the moment. what I see is that I saw that Rebecca mentioned Sam's book. I haven't really studied Sam in great detail, so I'm not, it's not about him. But what I see is that people who are trying to bring science and spirituality together, the ways that I've done it in the past has been to have something, let's call it, I don't know, I did it a bit in Soul Story. It's in, I've moved on from there, where it's like there's a big mind, or then a spirit or something which emanates or does something magic, and all of that, which is still in the mythical mindset. It's still taking concepts. And what I mean, let me define what I mean by mythical. It seems to me that there's a very common anachronistic use of language where we use the wrong language for the wrong level. So, and science does it in one way and spirituality does it in another. So science has discovered that if you really want to study the foundationals of the universe, you need to use mathematics. That is what works. But if you then take that language of mathematics and apply it to everything and go, we can reduce, everything gets reduced. Your love for your child is really just chemicals. Chemicals are just matter. Matter's just mathematics. It's like, no, it's not. Each level is more than. That's the whole point of emergence. So we can't use this language here. I can use it for studying physics, but I can't, it's not going to help me when I want to understand why I love my daughter. Conversely, what spirituality has done, because it's old, completely understandably, is it's taken the language from the human level and applied it to previous levels. Well, just earlier I said, you went back in time, and how would they understand thunder? Well, it's a big man with a mallet. Well, that's taking the human level, which is what you've got, and going, that's what's happening? It's not. We now, because we now have understood it in mathematical language. So that what's the mythic is taking the language of consciousness, intentionality, purpose, all these things that will take billions of years to arrive, and putting at the beginning. Well, that hasn't happened. What you've got here is a level that can only be understood with the most fundamental abstract relationships that we study with maths. It's very cold. That's why people don't like maths. It's because it's very far from the human experience. But it's going to turn into the human experience. So what I see is that what I did before was I took the evolutionary process, and this is the panentheism, and went, well, there's the something or the other, spirit, and then it's projecting itself or coming to know itself or some mythic thing. And what I've done since is gone, no, Tim, no, none of that. None of that. And then what I see with the other side, and I think this is what people like Sam are doing, but please forgive me if I don't know his work well enough, but you know the things I mean, which is to take spirituality and go, well, obviously that's all nonsense, but meditation's good for you. It changes your brain waves, and, you can find meaning, and we can translate spirituality into a kind of unspiritual form where we dismiss all that because that's mumbo jumbo, and obviously the soul doesn't survive death, that's nonsense, but we can take the good bits. I think both of those are mistaken for the same reason that the other thing, the anachronistic. I think we need to be bold enough to go, this is addressing a level of reality. You can experience it for yourself, we just haven't understood it. And we need to think in radically new ways to understand it, not to reduce it, but not to stick with the old mythic ways of thinking. We need to develop a radically new, that's what I mean by an emergent spirituality. So thank you. Let me rip on that, Brendan.
This is good stuff, rich stuff. Really enjoying this. Let's go over to Nish. Go ahead, Nish, and great to see you.
Hi, Nish.
Hi, Tim. Thank you so much for this. So I've got two questions, actually, so I'll be quick. The first question is the use of the term spiritual and tying it in with a view of the cosmos as an emergent or emerging system. Typically, more traditionally, the word spiritual has been used to denote something that is concerned with something beyond, something transcendent, something that gives meaning to life, which is otherwise meaningless, some kind of relationship between self and spirit. Now, if we want to use the word spiritual in this emergent paradigm, do we need to completely redefine spiritual, or is there a place for these ideas, transcendent, meaning, spirit? Do they just get redefined, or is it something completely different? And in what sense is it spiritual then?
Yeah.
So that's my first question. Second question, relationship between the brain and the mind, brain and the imaginal realm.
Yeah.
So two models. There's a simple ladder model where matter complexifies to become life, life complexifies to become mind.
Hey, Nish, let me stop you. Let's do the first one, and then because then I can concentrate on the second one, because I don't want to lose the first one, because it was really good, and I want to really get what you're saying. So you see, I've lost it already. So it'll come back. What was the first question? Spiritual. Yeah.
How do we term spirit?
Yeah, I know. I've thought about that as well. And part of me, I make up a lot of words because I can't find a word I like. And I've thought maybe I need to do that with spiritual, but somehow we need to make a bridge. So what I mean by spiritual is really what I think of is about spiritual experience. It's a type of experience. And what I mean by spiritual experience in its most simplest form is those moments when people just go, there's more going on here, isn't there, than my socio-biological existence. Just that. Now that's the simplest form, which I think a lot of people get. Just like, yeah, I kind of been living like this, and so, hang on, there's something more going on here, isn't there? A lot of people get that around death, for instance. Right to those awakenings where you go, oh my God, how did I miss all of this? So we need some way of pointing to that. And then what I'm suggesting with things like transcendence is that the thing I'm exploring, the essential idea is, what if existence is this process of becoming? Everything is the one process of becoming, because it's one. And so that the levels that we previously saw as outside are the more emergent levels. And in one way, they're outside because they're not physical. We step into the imaginal. Now, human beings have wrestled with the relationship between the imaginal and the sensory forever. And the traditional idea which emerged was that you are really the soul, the psyche, and you've become trapped in a body. And this is not a good place, which is why it's so full of suffering and life is so shit. And you need to get yourself free. And, Plato, the body is a tomb. And the whole Eastern tradition, this is Maya, and you're in samsara, and you get free. Then what's happened, they had no idea about the evolutionary process. So what we can do now is go, no, it's not. This is not. The reason that it's bittersweet, that it can be so beautiful and also so bitter, is because it's evolutionary. It just doesn't know what it's doing. And we are the ones going, oh, that's not good. I love that. More of that, less of that. That because we are the universe become conscious. So we can now do that. And then this transcendent level is I would suggest, is this divine super system, whatever name you want to give to that. And when you touch that, is the most, that's where I'm working, Brendan said, I'm working on a new project, which is going to come out hopefully next month, which will be a series of me talking like this, but as chapters, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I'll call it a pod book because it's a love child of a podcast and a book, the structure of a book, and then the kind of spontaneity of a podcast, or like this. And I've called it Why Your Life Really Matters. Because to me, all of this philosophy and all of the experience is all about what are the significance of our lives. And that's meaning. And I think if you have this understanding that we are evolving into this greater thing, and then you experience it and you start living in relationship to it, which is what you're saying, Nish, as I understand you, then all of that, the same experiences that were understood through the transcendent or something outside from which we'd fallen, because that's the old idea, fundamentally, we're fallen. God is already there and we're a spark that's got lost. Or we're a soul that has, got stuck in a lower level. And it just flips that around and goes, no, nothing as pessimistic as that. We can be much more optimistic about this. This is reaching up further and further into that. And your life is part of that. You play a role in that. And that's the meaning. So that's how I'd approach the spiritual thing, as well as acknowledging what you said. It's a difficult word because, I live in a place called Glastonbury. I don't know if you know about it in the US, but Glastonbury is a kind of new age. It's crazy. I mean, it's just like so much of spirituality. I just want to run down the street sometimes going, stop and think about it for a minute. Because it's just so nuts. But, that's the problem with language.
Thank you. Thank you so
So
much.
what was number 2?
Yeah, number 2, the relationship between brain and mind and the
Yes. And
So-
you were going to give me some models.
Yes, a couple of simple models. There's the kind of more simple ladder model where you have matter
Yep.
complexifies, becomes life complexifies, becomes mind.
Yeah.
And we can think of those perhaps as floors of a house. And from what we can see, you can't have life without matter. I mean,
Yep.
like you can't have a molecule without
Yep.
without atoms because it makes it up. So
Yep.
for the imaginal realm, which I'm assuming is to do with mind, for that to exist independently in some way after life has fallen away would be like the second floor of a house kind of still being there after
Yep.
the first floor has fallen away. That is okay. So I'd need to a little bit more on that to think about how that might work. The second model, which is the slightly more complex model, which is the integral model of Ken Wilber, you have 4 quadrants.
Yep.
And here, instead of reducing brain to mind or saying that they're radically separate, they're 2 aspects of the same co-arising holon.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they co-arise together. And the evidence for this seems to be that there does seem to be a correlation between the complexification of brain and the complexification of mind.
Yeah.
So again, here for the imaginal realm to exist independently, you'd have to kind of take one of those quadrants and say, well, that quadrant's going to continue independent of the other 3, even though they seem to be co-arising together.
Yes.
So how would this fit into these kind of understandings where they all seem to be part of the same thing and not
Okay. So it says they're wrong.
Okay.
It says, no, don't think about it like that. There's a better way. And part of my impetus to doing Soul Story and then all the work I've done since was seeing particularly what Ken was up to and, loving what he was up to and also feeling like this is not right, this bit here. So which can I address first? Let's go for your levels. First of all, complexity. It has become more complex because there's more past, but things also simplify. I just want to point that out, that it is more complex because there's more and more past, so there's more and more information, but things can also become simpler. It's not like just everything just gets more and more complex. You see that in the evolutionary process, just important. But the past is what is accumulating. So there's just more and more information. In that way, it is more and more and more. Now, what I'm suggesting is that we don't think about this as a holon. I think that's the mistake. Maybe I can do both of them at once. The Ken idea, if you take it as the inner, it's like, well, I'm not sure it is. I think it's a complete new level. I think that the subjective experience on the level of the body is the sensations. There's a subjective and objective level to the psyche. There's a subjective and objective level to the biological, and there's a subjective and objective level to the psyche. The psyche is not the subjective level of the body. The senses are. Look, this is another level. So then it goes, okay, so this, if that's right, if this is an objective and subjective level as well, like the body level, is it the next floor? And I think that's a confusion of holonic systems with emergent systems. Emergent systems are temporal. Some of them are holonic. Some of them arise by combining other elements into a bigger whole. The body's like that. I think God's like that. But the psyche doesn't combine lots of bodies into another whole. It's a completely different thing. It's like when you look at the emergence of social systems, say, completely different. They're emergent, but modernity didn't gather together lots of feudalisms and build. It's just change. It comes to another level. And what I think is happening with the psyche is that the biological system has evolved senses. It has evolved to focus on what matters, because that's a great evolutionary benefit. That's what we experience as conscious. All the rest we experience as unconscious. And then the processing, which has been going on forever, it can then focus on that. And that's when it turns, this whole new imaginal level arises. And it's not the floor built on it, it's emerged from it. You couldn't have the world of images until you'd had the experience of sensations. So it's emergent. It can only come, and by emergent, that's all I mean by emergent, by the way. I just mean you couldn't have this until you got that.
Yeah, I can't really.
So that you couldn't have had, you're right, the psyche until you got the senses and the biological being conscious. But it's not another flaw. It's another aspect of the system which is arising. It's like the first sense is probably touch, but sight isn't built on touch. It's another sense that developed. And I think the psyche is another sense. It's a way of sensing the universe. But it senses itself as well. So it can sense its own processing. And that arises as images. So the two things I would say is, I love Ken's work. He's very interesting. He's done huge contribution. But I don't think the idea that the psyche is the inner aspect, I think it's a mistake. I think it's missing that it's a whole new level. And it's absolutely essential to have that. And part of the reason that Ken doesn't do that is because he's got a load of spirituality at the beginning, really, with his whole idea of involution. So he's really got it still in a mythic context, which is what I talked to him about when I filmed with him. So that's where I think he is wrong. And I also want to go, look, it's not holonic. Some things are holonic, but most of emergence isn't. Most of emergence is just new things. A system developing new abilities, new qualities. The holonic jumps are quite specific and quite rare. So the whole flaws thing is completely the wrong model. And what you've got is this evolving system on the hard disk of the universe, the passivity, and it's developing to be able to do things. And any system, I would say that the whole evolutionary process has got kind of three aspects. And those three, Darwin stumbled across these three aspects so brilliantly with natural selection, but natural selection is only the biological level. Obviously, there's a whole physical level before that. So whatever the principles of evolution are, they're not just natural selection or genetics, because there was no genetics. And I think the principles are passivity and creativity, repetition and newness. So things repeating, but never quite the same, always coming into new relationships. And then sustainability, which is any system has to fit in with the whole. And when it can't, that system will stop. That's what happens everywhere. Fascinating, even with like basic atoms, they took quite a long time to be able to form and stay formed because they didn't have any passivity, I would say. It's chaotic. And then they formed, and now they're formed. And they're just formed. Easy. And that's gone through biology the same. And we can hold it together more and more. We're all, lived historically long lives already, everyone here. And that's developing. But when it fails, it will go. But the question is there a part of the system which can still function because it can still do what it does? It can still, the imaginal level is about working on the level of the imaginos. That's where it functions. It's where it's functioning right now. Now, also, please don't get me wrong. They are integrated like this right now. You give me a sleeping tablet, I will go out. But what you see is there's another phenomenon I didn't mention when I was talking about near-death experiences, which I've been studying a lot recently, which is fascinating, which is terminal lucidity, which is well worth looking at, where the documentation is quite extensive again of people who have literally their brains are completely gone, really. And then just before they die, they become completely lucid. And it's remarkably common, more common than you would possibly think. So the whole relationship between the brain and the psyche, I think, is really up for grabs. How these two levels relate. And I would say as an analogy that the brain is functioning more like a interface. And that's why it needs to be so complex, because it's, first of all, it's doing all of this, all of the biological level, which is huge, running the body, huge. So it's developed to do all of that. And then from it has come the psyche, which is this whole ideational level. And so the ideational network, which is what the psyche is interacting with the neurological network, which is what the body is, which is why it functions as one thing. But they are significantly different. They're different functions. That's hence the analogy of looking at me and listening to me. They come together, but they are different. And it is possible you can have one without the other. More like that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim.
Great question, Nish, and something that I also am really interested in. I think actually, Tim, we probably talked about that in the podcast that we did as well, because that's something I'm wrestling with in all this as well. So thanks for. Let's go to Justin and then Stina. Is that how you say your name? Yeah. So go ahead, Justin.
Thanks, Brendan. So Tim, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, I walked into this little new age bookstore in Calgary where I lived at the time. And I asked the guy, what's really hot right now? Like what's some new ideas? What is a book that people are talking about? And he pointed me to this little book, tiny little book. I don't remember the name of it, but the invitation was to imagine that you're kind of like walking around in a dream. You could read this book in like an hour. And that was my first encounter with you. And based on what you've said, there it is. Based on what you've said today, I imagine that was the old you that you know some of the changes that you've spoken about. So there's just been so much. I would share just a couple references to space, and then I want to try to maybe do a philosophical quibble with what you're talking about that I'm probably not qualified to do. But I've been listening to the telepathy tapes lately, and there's this podcast called the Telepathy Tapes. It's about kids with autism and how they seem to demonstrate this incredible capacity for telepathy. And it talks about how a bunch of the kids from all over the world go to this place in the imaginal realm, I guess, called the Hill, where they're able to communicate with each other and talk to each other. I don't know if this is true, haven't looked into it enough, but it just seems so interesting. And it would kind of suggest what you mentioned earlier, that this imaginal realm doesn't exist in space and maybe time the way that we imagine it, or that we think of our normal world. And that also reminded me of some of Kurt Leland's work on the multidimensional human, where he maps out, like in great detail, all these different bodies, the subtle body and mental body and Buddhic body and causal body, and how each of them go into these different realms. And it's like a whole map of all this different space. And he talks about one of the skills you need to develop to like navigate all this territory is an understanding of space in this realm, which is not like distant space. It's like a psychological space. So I found that very interesting. I don't, it's well beyond my personal experience, but I find it interesting to read about and think about if there's actually people that have the ability to kind of move through these spaces with that level of skill. But I was trying to.
Hey, Justin,
Yeah.
I by the pause, I had a feeling you were going to move on to the quibble.
Yes.
Shall I just comment on what you've already said before, and then we'll do the quibble?
Yeah.
Because what you said was really interesting. First of all, yes, lucid living. Oh God, I'm so proud of that book. It's just such a shame it's wrong. I think what I did was that, and through immense work, I managed to distill down the essential message. Most of my books are on what you would call a perennial philosophy approach to spiritual traditions, drawing out their similarities, very much in the spirit of Aldous Huxley and all the people that came after him. And then I really distilled it down to, this is it. And you can get it in an hour and you can experience it. And it worked. And people really did get it. And it took you into that way of seeing things. And it was lovely. And then gradually, it began to dawn on me that it wasn't good enough and it was wrong. And that's where this new one's come. So it's been it's been quite a, okay. Not just that one, but all of the books. I think they're good books, but they're articulate. And I think what happened was I articulated it so well for myself that I could finally see what was wrong with it. Because a lot of things that you don't see what's wrong with something, it's because it's all a bit mystical and a bit, so just like, I don't understand it, but that's because I'm not good enough, or I don't understand it because it's just beyond words, or, all of that fudge. So you never actually get the chance to disagree with it because you can't hold it. So I did get it. And then, so that's that. Then the kids who, funnily enough, I just came across for the first time a couple of days ago, haven't looked into at all. But it gives me a chance to I'm throwing out a lot of big ideas very quickly, but I'm going to do it anyway. What the hell? I think we need to understand the psyche as a sense. I think the system has developed senses with which it reads the universe. Systems are all in relationship to the universe. They all read the universe. Chemical systems read the universe and respond with an explosion, all that sort of stuff. Relationality is the fundamental nature of the universe. Everything is that one thing in relationship to itself as everything else. And we've evolved to see, to read light. We've evolved to, respond to airwaves, to listen. And I think this other psi sensing, which is how we can read the hard disk of the universe. We can read the information. And so one of the things that I never asked, and I never hear anyone ask, is, well, if you're experiencing, let's say, the oneness of everything, how do you experience that? Because you can't see it or touch it. So how do you experience that? Or if you experience all of these things, anything in spirituality, a vision, well, how are you seeing a vision? And what is it you're seeing? It's like, well, I think it's a sense. So when you're reflecting on your own processing, you're sensing yourself. But I don't think because it's an ecology, it's not just yourself. That's the easiest thing to sense. And a bit like the physical senses developed first with close up, touch, and then basic sight, and then, and then it evolves. I think the psyche is developing as a sense. And what I see is that some people are really good at doing, I seem to be better than most people for some reason, since I was a kid, of sensing that thing I call God. I just can find it. And not all the time, but I can. And I've learned how to do it better. Some people can't do that so easily. I can find the oneness. I can kind of tune in to people who've passed on, but not like some people I know. They can really do it. Now, there's a lot of charlatans, a lot. So that makes it all very difficult. There's a lot of scientific charlatans too, mind you. There's charlatans everywhere. And then, so you go, I love this little thumb that keeps coming out the screen. So what I'm suggesting is a sense. So they are connecting, but I suspect we all are. I suspect you are with me right now. And if we really paid attention and focused on each other, which is one of the things I do with people online, I gather people all around the world and we pay attention to each other, and you can really go, oh my God, I'm actually connecting with you. But not physically, we're on the other side of the world. You're connecting. And when you said about it's space, you can create imaginal space, but you're connected with everyone who you have in your life. They could be on the other side of the world, but you're connected with them. Just like every idea you have is connected with another idea that resonates with it. Everything it's connected through meaning, a narrative in the psyche. And I think it's perfectly possible that these kids are doing that. But I also think we all do it a bit. And then some people are really good. And I think, when we remember, we are sensing the past. But like everything else, we can sense it badly and we have to understand it and we get it wrong. And some of us, I'm not got a great memory, can find it sometimes. But if you give me a clue, I can home in on it and that I remember. But there's some people, there's 65 of them alive at the moment, I believe, who have hypothermia, who can remember everything, literally everything. So if you said, in 1975 in the morning, what did you have for breakfast? Oh, yes, I had poached eggs. And then I read the paper. The paper said, it's like, and they're right. They can remember everything. They're that good, to me, at sensing the past. They can do that. I can do it a bit. And I think the same with these psychic abilities, all the rest of it. Or walking into a place and just going, I'm sensing this place. I'm not sensing it with my biological senses. I'm psi-sensing it and going, this place feels amazing, or this place feels dark, or there's something wrong here, or all of those things. I think we should take them seriously because the psyche is a sense, and that's what those kids are doing. Quibble.
So all that resonates a lot with me. So where I want to quibble is I was trying to parse out, because I think I heard the word emergent like 7 or 8 times in the first, minute or two of this discussion, and I was like, okay, are we referring to emergence in like the technical philosophy of mind sense of like strong emergence of that we're saying that physics is the base layer of reality?
No, I'm not.
You're not saying that.
No.
Okay.
I'm using it as in much more colloquial sense.
Okay.
So the way that it's that other sense that you're talking about has become very popular relatively recently, really. What I mean by it is much more like something new's emerged. That's all I mean. I mean, something new has happened which couldn't have happened without the thing that happened before it. And sometimes, so it's the evolutionary process, and in the evolutionary process, there are moments of significant novelty in which a whole new thing is happening. So, life has started. Where did it start? Like, hard to say, isn't it? But it did, or whatever it is. So that's all I mean by it. I don't mean strong emergence, weak emergence, anything like that. And I'm certainly not reductionist, the complete opposite. So there's a whole, this is a trouble language, a whole group of people who want to use the idea of emergence to shore up reductionism. I want to use the idea of emergence to completely object to reductionism and to go, what I'm saying is there is more information in the universe now than there was before. It cannot be reduced to the state before. The higher levels cannot be reduced. Absolutely not. Because they are more emergent. They're more than. That's how I'm using the word. And I know the difficulty, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, my experience is I'm having trouble making sense of what you're saying then, because as I heard you talk, it became more and more, it seemed more and more like that was what you were saying. And
I hope I haven't confused you, Justin. What do you think I'm saying?
Well, it seemed like you were saying that mind did not exist at the beginning of the universe.
Yeah, no, it's all emerged. Yeah, I think I'm saying everything with any qualities whatsoever has emerged in one process of differentiation. And in that process, we can talk about new things emerging. You could say evolving if you prefer, just evolve, move the word.
What's your ontology then? What is the base layer of reality in your view? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, okay. What I think we need to grasp is that the further to more foundational levels we go, those levels we need to understand with maths. And my guess is that the primal levels of emergence or evolution, or whatever we want to call that, are mathematical. They're what we study with maths. And it goes right the way back to the fundamental. And here I'm a bit, it's a bit like Taoism or Kabbalah or Gnosticism or Pythagoreanism, which goes, look, these are fundamental relationships that we study with maths. They're archetypes. And they will get fleshed out as all these other qualities that come out, which is why, the world is full of maths, and why the what's the word? sacred geometry and the fact that this is the Fibonacci sequence, and all, because mathematics is the beginning, the first level. That's going to lead to, well, currently it would be like the quantum level, where you're still not in time. You're still not in. Time is going to emerge. Space is going to emerge from a mathematical level. But the mathematical level, if you go back and back and back, the simplest one is the bit, this or that, duality, yin and yang. So what's before that? Well, nothing's before that, but what the yin and yang is the relationship of something which is formless. So that would be, in spiritual terms, would be non-dual. But so when I say the one, when I said earlier, I just mean one, not one of anything, just one. It's one. So it starts with one, but one is in relationship as two, and that's going to give rise to all of this mathematical stuff. And then actually the fact that the universe is going to emerge from that, I won't go into that, it's too complex. So my basic ontology would be like there is something which exists but is undifferentiated. What is it? Well, it's nothing. What qualities does it have? It doesn't have any qualities. And if you look around you now and you have that intuition, if you can sense the oneness of the universe, the fact that it is a universe, if you do that now and you go, yeah, but what is the oneness? What's the thing that makes the floor and the air and my arms and my thoughts and everything one? Well, just that it exists. Being. So you could say there's a oneness of being, but there's nothing. I mean, there's no quality to it. It's kind of what this was what the Buddhists mean when the Zen Buddhists talk about the isness of things. It's like there's an isness which everything shares, and it's developed from that. And it's also why I think if you've had this experience, particularly in meditation, I get this, where if you really focus on the ground, it's empty, it's void. It's like that. It is nothing because it has no qualities, and that's that's the whole, again, the Buddhist thing of it being, the emptiness. The void. But that void has become everything. It's that formless has evolved into every form. So if you shift your attention from the emptiness to the fullness, it's like it's all one thing. And I'm arising. The one thing is as Tim is meeting the one thing as Justin. And that's a big shift in how you see yourself, because you're suddenly in real intimate connection with everything. You're not just this little bubble of skin bag, as Alan Watts used to say. You're everything is this one thing turning into everything and meeting itself in. But as you, it's not like it's a thing. I used to have this kind of more of an image that it was like looking through you, like you were a tunnel and it was behind. But I don't think that. I think it's as you. It's arisen as Justin. And there's Justin. He's on the leading edge of the fucking universe. This is 13.8 billion years to get to Justin. And he's right, it's like, wow, that level of richness that we exist on these different levels. Fantastic.
Thanks for the clarification.
But I know it's pretty radical because the mythic thing has been around for a very, 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 very long time. So the intuition has been, there must be a something. But to get to the point where we go, it's not like that. You have to think in radically different ways. So to say, but why did the one become the two? It's a bit like going, does 4 like chocolate? It's like, what? There's a crazy question. There's a completely wrong question. Because at this level, there isn't any of that. But it will become all of that, which is why we're here looking back at it. There we go.
So
great questions.
Yeah. Was that anything else, Justin? Or are you all set?
I'm all set. I'll post a couple thoughts in the chat. But
yes, please do. Great.
Thanks, Justin. They're really great comments.
Let's go to Stina, who's been most patiently waiting. And then it's already 1:30 on the Eastern seaboard. We can start to draw to a close a little bit after that. But if anyone does have any questions still that they'd like to ask, if you just go ahead and put up your hand, and maybe we'll have some closing thoughts briefly with you and me, Tim, and then call it a day. But go ahead, Stina.
Yeah, thank you. I'm in Sweden, so it's 7:30 here. And this book set me off to follow you, Tim. It was really an important book for starting a process that has been going on for over 20 years now. And I'm working with a collective. And I'm also very inspired by Rupert Sheldrake, his morphic fields. So you can say that I'm actually taking the morphic field as a first-person perspective. So it's about, we were talking about the group, that we can sense each other, how we are together. And what I do is that I sense what I call the embrace of the group. So it's, or the morphic field. So it's not the individuals, it's the collective. And that is amazing what we can do. So you can also sense into the embrace of humanity, planet, universe. So these, I mean, we can Wilbur's, it will be holons. They are realities from when we work with them. And they're very different and we sense them. And for me, that is much more, that's really important because it's a spirituality that is grounded in this reality. So I don't have the soul by itself in another way. But I really see that with us taking those perspectives, we are changing what we already belong to, all this physical, biological, cultural levels. So I resonate with a lot of what you say, but I have a more of an integrated view of this, as the spiritual, subtle, pure awareness levels are actually aspects of the whole reality, and not as there is a oneness, but there is also many onenesses all the way. If you can call any holon or morphic field experiences it as a oneness. And it's also, people get it. They are there and they are real. So just
So I love that. I probably have come to see things in a different way now. I don't think there is any such thing as pure awareness. I think that's just doesn't exist. And I think that was just a way of seeing things that I passed through. But I do think I'm certainly seeing everything as integrated. Everything. You know, when I talk about the soul surviving, it doesn't go off anywhere. It's all part of the one process of becoming. It's just another level of the same process of becoming, and the biological level is inherent in it because it's origin from it, and the physical level, and it's one thing. It's all one process. But the stuff that I want to really focus in on, Stina, is the practices you're talking about, because they sound quite similar to things that I've been exploring for whatever it is, 25 years. Which is because to use the language I've been developing, I would say that you're psi sensing. That's using that's what the psyche does. It senses, and you can tune in. So one of the things which I do is I get together every Sunday night, not tomorrow actually, but every other Sunday night, with a group of people from all over the world, small group of people, and we either talk philosophy like we've done today, or we do these practices which involve things like you're describing, which involve being able to sense each other and the collective that we form. And then very much what I'm suggesting with what we experience as the divine, let's say, or the super soul, is that collective, but in a very established and deep way, not like the collective that we formed here today, but like a collective that's been forming for some time now, and which is well established, and we can touch into it and move away from it and come back to it. So in that way, I really resonate a lot with what you're exploring. And And like I said, the idea of the morphic fields is when I'm talking about the hard disk of the universe or a passivity system, that's very much, Rupert likes the field metaphor. I don't mind the field metaphor, but I don't necessarily think we need it because it's not spatial. I think it's the thing, but it's closer to what David Bohm called the implicate and the explicate, that there's something behind like now when I'm looking at the screen. It's like there's something behind this which is making this happen. And I think science has been very much about exploring what it is behind this and understanding it, which is why we can now do amazing things. We understand what's behind it. And then spirituality is the same, but on the level of the psyche. You get to see the superficial levels of this, or the individual levels, let's call them, rather than superficial, relatively easily. But even seeing yourself is pretty hard, isn't it? Just to see your own. I'm 65 and I'm seeing new things about myself all the time, probably now more than ever. So it's not easy to even sense your own processing, but you can, and then you can also widen it out like you're suggesting. We can do it, connect with each other, connect with the way in which we form a group. These are really important things to do, I think.
And for me, the really important thing is the planetary. I think that if humanity are going to survive on this planet, we need to become, we know intellectually, all this, that we are living on a round planet and the system, but to really sense it, to sense a deep belonging to the planet, I think that's so crucial right now. So for me, that is the emergent level, the planetary awareness.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I love that, but I also want to just reiterate, just in case anyone has misunderstood me and I've misled anyone. When I talk about the level of the Imaginal, it's not going off anywhere. It's absolutely arising, and it's no more than you're talking to me now. But the fact that we're having a conversation in the psyche, really, that's where it's all happening, doesn't mean that we're not physical or biological. We are. And that there's a whole domain which is on that level doesn't mean it's not connected to and influencing all the time. And that when I talk about the super system, what we experience as God, it isn't gone off anywhere. I think it's interacting with this all the time. I think the whole thing is interacting. All these levels are interacting. That's the key.
Of course.
And that's why we need to focus on those things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, beautiful.
Thanks, Stina.
And thanks for reminding me of the Laughing Jesus. That's a long time ago. Beautiful. Yeah. It was an important book for me at the time too.
Just in the interest of time, so maybe we go to Joe just because he hasn't asked a question yet, and then Nish, if you've got a quick question, we can go to you, and then we can start to come to a close. So go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I didn't actually I have questions, but I'm not going to ask them because I actually attend the ICU meetings every Sunday, and I get to ask those questions. But a large part of what made this happen was the attempt to bring an experiential retreat to Sky Meadow. So I just wanted to sort of put out a mini commercial. That is still in the planning. It is still my intention to do so. And Tim is very much taking this philosophy into the experiential realm. And so that's what we hope to bring to Sky Meadow. So back to Nish with, I'm sure, a really great question.
Yeah, I'll just on that point, thanks. Yeah, we'd love to get Tim out here at the Sky Meadow sometime. And as you said, Joe, we're still kind of planning, see how that it could happen. We're also thinking of, I think this is still in the works of doing another one of these, I believe, in March. So I'll have more information on that. But yeah, we're just really trying at Sky Meadow to weave into all these various different thinkers, communities, and the avenues where this kind of thought is happening, and yeah, come together. And speaking of well, what was the word that was used a minute ago? Collectives or communities? Yeah. Anyway, we're trying to build that out in a rich way. So yeah, hopefully we could get Tim from across the pond at some point.
It probably might be helpful just for folks to understand is that most of the focus for most of my life has been on experiential. It's recently I've given myself over the last 10 years, but even then, I call myself a philosopher, but I think really I'm a big love junkie. I just want us to come into that beautiful, beautiful communion with each other, and which you experience as this enormous love, because that's the point of all the philosophy for me, that it supports that and helps us understand why that's so important. So the stuff we do experientially together is the heart and soul of it. That's hugely important.
Yeah. All right, go ahead again, Nish, and then we'll come to a close.
Thank you. I'll ask the question, but if it's going to take too long, we can leave it for another day. If you're talking about the imaginal realm as something that emerges, and if the imaginal realm is the key to understanding, for example, near-death experiences or rebirth and so on, does that mean that these after-death or afterlife experiences are only accessible to sentient beings who have reached a certain level of emergence, as opposed to being a default for everybody?
Yeah, great question. My own guess, all of this is my own guess, really, all of it's like, what's the most plausible thing that I can arrive at, given what I've experienced and what I know, would be that certainly all human beings are well established now in the psyche. And that's probably been the case for a long time. Beyond that, I'm not sure. But that would be my intuition. I think that's kind of something. I think the process of evolution has just moved on to a new level, like it did with life from matter, say, a whole new level, and that the cycle of like rebirth and all that, it's just the latest way of evolving, because the biological level is fantastic and moved relatively fast because of life and death. Because if you've got death, you keep getting reproduction, you get rid of all the old ones and you fill it with lots of new ones. It's a fantastic way to evolve species. And that's what's happened. But it's a terrible way to evolve individuals, because they just keep dying. And I think what's happened is that as we've evolved, it's now about the individual. It's the individual that's evolving. And that's why it's worked out a way, like it worked out a way to how to be alive. It's worked out a way how to not lose the individual and let the individual keep moving. That would be my guess, and that I would guess that's true of anyone who's developed that, has that level of individuality, which I think is certainly everyone I've ever met. So that would be my guess.
Thank you very much, Tim. Thank you.
It's been a real delight. It's been some fantastic questions, guys. It's been so lovely. I can see you all on the screen. It's like being in the room with you, which is just great.
Yeah, these have been really amazing questions. This was delightful. Thank you, everyone, for contributing your ideas and your questions. This is just what I hoped it would be. And just a couple of final thoughts then. Well, one, I'll just say for myself and for, what these things are, again, to mention Sky Meadow again, I just love when I encounter a new thinker who is engaging with stuff I'm engaging in, but also maybe going in different directions, proposing ideas I never thought of, presenting models in a different way than I'd organized them or I've found organized before. And so that to me is really stimulating and generative. And yeah, Tim has been one of those thinkers. And so there's so much that this brings up for me that raises a whole new set of questions, some of which have even been proposed in here. And I'm still wrestling, Tim, with your work and your ideas, but I think that that's part of what's so fun about this is seeing these things from a new perspective. And hopefully we can, again, bring these multiple ideas and perspectives together and try to have a more flourishing community conversation that's kind of tackling these ideas from these different angles and having that kind of intellectual foment that is so rich. So that's a big part of the mission of Sky Meadow, and I think that the work that Tim is doing is directly related to that. So thank you, Tim, for, again, just the time, for your work. One last thing I definitely do want to just have you speak to briefly is your current work, is the pod book. Say a little bit about that and what you're up to. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Brendan, for making this happen, and Joe, who was also very involved in making this happen. If hopefully we'll get the chance to do it again, we can go deeper, we can spread out into different areas. I think having these conversations with people who are moved in this direction is really important. So it's been lovely hanging out with you. If you want to do more of this with me before we get together again through Brendan, like I said, I do this every Sunday. So if you go to my website, timfreke.com, because it's such a weird name, you will find me. You can come along to the ICU and pop in of a Sunday evening. It's the evening here, so it's earlier in America, like it's evening now for me. And we have people literally from all over the world. But it's a small enough group that we can really connect like this. And again, like you were saying, Stina, people have formed into a collective. And it astonishes me that when we sit and meditate at the beginning, it's just like, it's so strong. It's just, wow, what's going on here? Something's happening. So there's that. The other thing which I would love you to engage with if you are interested is that I have this pod book coming out. It will be released as video on YouTube. It will be free. I'm going to give it away. It's been 8 years work just about every day. And I just want to get it out there. I'm recording it literally yesterday, the day before, and I hope it will come out in February. It's going to be soon. So if you're interested in that, please sign up to my newsletter on my website, or that's the best way, because you'll definitely hear about it then. But also you can subscribe on YouTube, or will be available as an audio podcast as well, but it will be video really. So that's what I'm up to, and it's the attraction for me is I can take you through the ideas like I did today, but I can take it through. Okay, get this idea, get this idea, get this idea, get this idea, and my aim is that I'm lucid enough that you can then judge it for yourself. You've got it. You go, okay, I see what he's saying. What do I think of that? And how does that relate to my experience? So I'm working as hard as I can to get it across with that lucidity.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to that because, as you've said, you have changed and evolved in your own thinking on these things, and I both really respect that when people can be like, yeah, I did this whole thing, but now I actually don't, I think that's all wrong. Like that shows learning and updating, and it's commendable. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to the most recent update patch to Tim Freke's operating system.
So funnily enough, Brendan, I've got a video coming out probably, I think, next Friday. It'll be in my newsletter and on YouTube, having a conversation with somebody who has known me for a very long time, going through what the hell happened. How did you change your mind? Nice. Like, what was the journey that has ended up here? So
yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to seeing where you're at with all this and going through that. And I would love to have you on the Meta Modern podcast to talk about that when that comes out. But all right, well, why don't we call this there? This is amazing. Thanks again, Tim, so much. Again, thanks, Joe. Thank you for everyone for all of your wonderful questions and what you brought into this. And stay tuned to the general space, because I'll also post things in terms of this recording and our follow-up conversation that will be happening in March and other things happening. So looking forward to all the things. Thank you so much. Godspeed. Take care, everyone. Till next time.